Good tidings, all you fine feathered individuals. We are back here on League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys for I'm going to call it, maybe not madness, the surprise run that we are witnessing in the LCK Gauntlet.
Yeah, talking about Hanwha Life facing off against Nongshim. This is it. World's on the line. Time to book your ticket. Who's going to get to face off against the play-in squads and make their destiny? Let's get into the series.
And we gotta talk about leading into this whole playoff run, because you remember how tight the standings were in the LCK. Nongshim, Live Sandbox were getting legit deserved conversation for being the best team in the LCK to close out the regular season. Nongshim obviously had your MVP in Peanut. They had the player of the split in Gory. And then you get into this series and the momentum that Hanwha Life got from Live Sandbox. It was not a one-off, Mark. They looked even better in their second best of 5 against Nongshim.
And we've had many series where we've had to talk about, okay, it's a 3-0, but you watch the series, it's way more competitive. There's more pushback. Hanwha just had everything on the day. They didn't care in game 1, game 2, game 3. It was clear domination. And when we talk about domination from Hanwha Life, it's very important that we're not just talking about what Chovy was doing. And yes, there's many examples in lane, out of lane, I don't care where lane. Chovy was dominating in this series every game. But the bigger thing for me is the way that the rest of the Hanwha Life team played. And as we mentioned yesterday, talking about that bottom lane with Deft and Vista, and specifically the job that Deft was doing, how he has stepped up his form recently. This is the type of level that you can be confident in putting some faith behind Hanwha Life.
18, 3, and 22 was Deft across this game. That bumps his KDA to 10.7 in these last two series. He's been the focal point, the standout player for Hanwha in these first 7 games in the entire Gauntlet run. I think Vista is a guy that even in the regular season when Hanwha was struggling, he was still a bright light. Behind Chovy, it was like, you know what, Vista has been more than serviceable. He's been a plus for them, and we've only seen more and more of that throughout these playoffs. Willer, we talked about being the jungler. After going back and forth between junglers, they finally settle on the third option in Willer and has looked much better. Morgan, 2 more Camille games, but we finally got to see him on a Renekton, aka a pick that wasn't Camille.
Everybody in chat was saying, oh my God, we're sweating up here in Morgantown. We got to think of something. GG, Camille is banned out. None of that, my dudes. It was smooth sailing still in that game 3. That is one of those X factors Morgan is going to continue to be for this Hanwha Life team. And yes, as much as getting this to this level of power, this consistency has required, as we talked about with the bottom lane. And as you mentioned, Vista has been a consistent bright spot throughout this split for Hanwha Life, and the fact that now you're able to talk about Deft as that shining star in the bottom lane. Some of that spotlight from what Vista's doing, that's not about Vista's level of play dropping down. It was about Deft's going up. The X factor in Morgan is so interesting because if he can play and be an outlet for the team to have some strength or not give up the resources that he was at times to the other side, that can be a big difference maker in the level of power that we see from a Hanwha Life team.
Aside from individual players stepping up for Hanwha, the biggest thing that has been the difference in this regional run is they're not making as many head-scratching plays. The macro, whatever they sat down in this 2 to 3 week break with the coaching staff, it was just, guys, you don't need to force these fights, or you don't need to be contesting things you don't need to. You don't need to get lost around the map, because something has clicked for them in these last 2 series. And you can talk about a combination of Live Sandbox and Nongshim not living up to the hype that they got at the end of the regular season, and that is absolutely true. We did not see... It felt like Nongshim halfway through game 2, they kind of woke up and got into the series, and then it was too late in that game. They kind of have that ending where Hanwha ends up winning that match in kind of crazy fashion, and then it felt like their spirit was broken, and game 3 was kind of a stomp. So it felt like we got half a game of the Nongshim we were expecting to see.
Absolutely is that conversation that needs to happen around the disappointment in performances from Live Sandbox, and specifically for me, Nongshim, where my expectation was higher from what we had seen throughout not only spring, but summer as well. The way that they had continued to progress and make strides as a team and what you had. Unfortunately, in this regional gauntlet, you saw a regression in their level of play and what they were able to do. You talk about the top side with Rich, what he was doing, how he had progressed throughout the summer split to be a more stable option for the team. That wasn't the case in this series, even up against Morgan. You look at the other members of the team. Gory had quite the summer of improvement. And yes, I know you're asking a lot going up against Chovy, but that's the deal in the LCK. It's either Chovy or Showmaker or Faker, BDD, take your pick. It's gonna be a tough match against any of these mid laners. Wasn't up to the task against Chovy. And then you look at the rest of the team. You have a bottom lane of Dukdam and Kellum, and they have been fantastic throughout this year, and they were not up to the task of what Def and Vista were able to put out for Hanwha Life. So yes, there is that conversation, and rightfully so, about the hype around Hanwha Life and their continued run in this regional gauntlet of looking good. But there is that other side of the coin that does need to be talked about with some underperformance, specifically from Nongshim.
Yeah, and Dukdam was getting hyped from other players, talking about being world class, one of the 5 best AD carries in the world, and 3 games in a row, Deft absolutely slams them into the dumpster. It was first blood all 3 games for Hanwha, and to their credit, they were camping bot lane. First blood was always coming bot lane, whether it was a gank or a 4-man dive. I think in game 3 with the Galio, the focal point was on the bot lane. It absolutely paid off for them. They book a ticket to Worlds, although you wouldn't know it after the game. After they win game 3, you go to the players, and it looked like they won game 1 in week 4 of the regular season.
They've got eyes on not going to play-ins. They want to make sure that it's T1 getting sent into the play-ins as that 4th representative for the LCK. Yes, all business from Hanwha Life. They know the task is not done. They need to refocus as soon as possible on that next series. They show it with the business-like emotions after closing out the series.
And again, it's the quick turnaround, which favors Hanwha with all this momentum. Now, T1 sitting there watching these first 2 series. If I'm the coaching staff of T1, I'm absolutely sweating a bit watching this version of Hanwha coming after you next.
And you know what, though? Yes, you are sweating a little bit, but this is exactly the type of opportunity that T1 needs to reprove themselves to a lot of people after the performance in the finals against Damwon, getting an opportunity against a team that has shown improvement, shown the level of play, and brings some star power the way that Hanwha Life does. If T1 is able to handle them with some convincing games and, handle that series and make sure they're the 3rd seed for the LCK, you can have a little bit more faith restored into the form of T1 and what they were bringing and just what Damwon brought to the table in that final. On the flip side, if they get ousted by this Hanwha Life team, if they get pushed down to that 4th spot, need to be doing some thinking and some searching on the T1 side.
Either way, a play-in team is either matching up in the mid lane against Chovy or Faker. You can take your pick. You want the legacy, obviously you go Faker. You want sheer lane dominance and how horrible and oppressive it can be in that lane, then you're going to get Chovy. It's a fun matchup either way for all these teams.
It is going to be an exciting time knowing that we've got that 4th seed just waiting from the LCK.
The biggest thing for me looking into this matchup is going to be the top side, because I still think Morgan is a big question mark, much as we're joking about the Camille picks over and over. Kana had some great performances against Khan in the finals, and in the playoff series before that, he absolutely stepped up for T1. So the way I see this Hanwha train getting derailed is a big top diff.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you need to look at, and yes, I know we joked about it, and we saw an answer for it in that game 3. No Camille for Morgan. On the other side with Kana, I have a little bit more faith in what his champion pool is and what he has shown us so far this year. That is going to be the one additional factor into that top lane matchup. I think the matchups can be more so in the favor of T1 looking at that champion pool as well. Want to see some bounce back performances from Faker. Going up against Showmaker, sure, that's tough. Going up against Chovy, that's also going to be pretty darn tough the way that we have seen Chovy play. Want to see some strong performances in lane and out of lane from Faker in this series.
And listen, this series, Chovy had great CS numbers as always, but it was a couple of Zir games and a Galio. Not exactly lane dominant champions, and he was still getting these big edges over Gory. Obviously, that's just kudos to Chovy as a champion or as a player. Teddy versus Deft is also going to be pretty fun. And I'm talking this version of Deft, because this is the reason you talk about him as one of the best 80 carries of all time.
Of course, this is one of those ones where finally the power of the players right now and how they've played matches up to the names. You know, usually you get into this type of situation over the last year, you've had to talk yourself down out of getting hyped up in this match, going, Deft is not the same. The way that they're playing, the level, it's not there to try and bill it as the star matchup. You can do that now. The way that Deft has played in this regional gauntlet, the way that Teddy looked throughout the playoffs, you have to be looking at this as a mega clash in the bottom lane. And yes, what you saw from these past series from Hanwha Life, there's going to be a focus from the rest of the team in making sure that you do get advantages in that bottom lane and you get out ahead. Going to be interesting to see how Teddy and Kyria respond to that.
Final seeding, who's going to play-ins for the LCK and the LPL finals on the same day. Oh, it's going to be a fun day on that Thursday. A little bit of bad news, unfortunately, because we have another Worlds. Again, not confirmed update. The rumors have been pretty on point. It's another reputable source for this one that the VCS, again, will not be attending the World Championship. That's MSI this year, now Worlds last year. If this ends up being true, and again, it sounds like it's going to be, we will not have seen Vietnam at an international competition since 2019 Worlds, Mark.
Way too long without getting to see the VCS. It's just really a shame when yes, this is a rumor right now, and our fingers are every finger crossed and every type of good luck to try and hope that this is false. But all signs point to it being the VCS once again not being able to make it. And of course, everybody, ourselves included, understands the way the world is and what it has been like this last year or so, and the difficult situations and trying to make sure everyone's safe and healthy. But at the end of the day, not being able to see these players, not getting the fans to see their champions go up against the best in the rest of the world, prove themselves, have pride in their region, really does sting and really is an incredibly unfortunate side effect of what's going on around the world.
And Vietnamese fans were already reeling. They didn't even have a summer split. So if the two squads, because there's two seeds that the VCS gets at these international events, they were debating, do you just bring the Marines and Buffalo, who were the runner-up and finalists from the spring split, or do you do a little mini tournament to kind of decide who the top two are going to be? Obviously, it seems like none of that is going to be true. If this does end up happening, then the question extends to, okay, how does this change the World's format? Because you remember last year when Vietnam didn't attend, Riot changed the entire play-in stage to kind of just make two really big groups of 5 instead of those 4 groups of 3 or 3 groups of 4 that they normally do. And the format ended up actually being pretty fantastic. You remember Mad Lions didn't get through the play-in stage, and it was incredibly competitive.
I don't know, the situation might change with the way the seeding would work out. You have someone like Rogue maybe not having to go through a play-in type of stage. And yes, as you said, made do with the best of a bad situation, not having the VCS, unfortunately. The way that they changed around the format was, in fact, more entertaining. We did get a lot of good fights, good matches, and that type of thing, especially earlier on compared to previous Worlds. But still, the cost of not getting to VCS is so unfortunate, and especially when we talked about this rumor and more or less confirming that it's going to be in Iceland for the event once again, hoping that, okay, going back to this type of destination, sure, it's not exciting, all these other type of things that would be negatives, but one of the positives we expected was hopefully this would lead to being able to secure the VCS, having an understanding of what it takes to make sure that you're getting through here. And it's still just not enough. And I know that, that's more so to do with the heavy restrictions for Vietnam and everything else. But still, an unfortunate side, and there's nothing else to be said about it.
Yeah, I think still one of the biggest issues is when the event finishes, the team's getting back into Vietnam. So I guess even it being in Iceland, a place that has relatively zero COVID compared to other places, doesn't even really matter at that point. You mentioned Rogue potentially getting promoted right into the main stage. That's a negative for Rogue, if you're asking me. Based on how they've qualified for Worlds, we're talking about 3-8 in their playoff run, and the one series that they did win was with a suspect Viego pentakill against Misfits to even win that one for them. If you're going to be having this almost month hiatus, I'm sure, by the time they're actually playing matches, and you're immediately going to be getting dropped against an LPL or an LCK team with no warm-up to it, it's going to be disaster for Rogue.
Yeah, you're completely right. We just talked about T1 and Hanwha Life being the finals for that LCK regional gauntlet and what that provides for T1, what it can provide as a step up for Hanwha Life to get another, opportunity to sharpen yourselves for this world event. Rogue just getting up, going to go get up and go into the rest of the group stage. That is absolutely, as you said, detrimental to what their progression could be, how they could grow, what the lessons they need to learn about themselves, and then get back up on that horse, get back up on that championship type of level. Just jumping out of the gun from groups is obviously a lot harder than having that opportunity for them in planes.
And the other kind of thing that people talked about, and it was mentioned last year at Worlds, because the LCK only had 3 seeds, and T1 would have been that 4th one with Vietnam not coming, and everyone was like, oh, just bring Faker in. That's much better for, obviously, the fans will want that. Riot wants that. Well, this year, if that were to be the case, 2 spots opening up for Vietnam, the 4th seed, you would think the LCS and LEC get a 4th team, and Mark, that would be G2 and TSM. Ever heard of those orcs?
And you know what? It's the same type of conversation. And yes, maybe not exactly the same when you're, saying, oh my God, we could get Faker to come to the event. Yes, as much as you love Caps and as much as we love Power of Evil, not exactly the same level of conversation around those two compared to someone like Faker. But I think it still holds the same weight when you talk about looking at these organizations as a possible, replacement. I'm not in favor. I don't like this idea of giving away a world spot in that situation. I know that, yes, you do need to fill out the rest of these numbers to some degree to figure out how you're doing, the round robins and all these type of play-ins, but I would rather juggle it around and do something different in that regard than to award these world spots to teams that we've already seen fight for that opportunity and come up just short.
I think the only way you could do it is if you have another mini tournament. You can't just give it to that 4th place seed, because that almost takes away the integrity of the entire playoff bracket that you had for them to just go, okay, you guys get promoted. I don't see Riot doing that. I get it. G2 and TSM both have such massive fan bases, and people would probably, it would make the tournament more interesting, I'm sure. But like we said, last year, the playing stage was the best we've ever seen.
It's like sneaking, a slice of cake that I shouldn't be having this slice of cake. It's not okay at this time. Yeah, sure. It's still going to taste good. It's still cake. You're still going to be happy seeing TSM, still seeing G2. These teams that was sad to say goodbye to them for this year. You'd be happy to get another opportunity, another game of them. But it's not worth it, guys. The level of integrity that would go down, as you mentioned, to just give away these type of spots in a response to what you have to change. That's not the way to do it. We have seen Riot adapt the format, and as you said, with play-ins before, and it was a good success, a much better avenue to try and find a proper fix here.
The cake tastes good at the time, but there's a bellyache coming right after that. That's what you're getting with G2 and TS7. You just get disappointed twice is what's going to happen. You thought it was over for the season. They come back and disappoint you one more time. I will say one last thing on the VCS. I wonder if this is going to, take a few steps back for the overall international competitiveness of that entire region to have missed out on 3 straight international events now.
You better believe it. It's going to have some type of effect on it, because when you talk about the VCS and the strides, consistent growth, the level of excitement that they've been able to bring, well, you have to go back to 2017 MSI, these type of things, as far as looking for that spark in growth. The type of success that they were able to have at those international events, the type of experience that they're able to gain from going up against the, anywhere from play-in level teams to these championship squads that they had. This is the difference that going to these international events can have: the experience, the growth, the lessons learned, the beatings that you take from some of these upper teams. All of these things play into sharpening yourselves And what we have seen at the very least from the VCS compared to many iterations from the LCS and whatnot, we've actually seen those lessons taken home, and not just for the team that went to the event, but to get those lessons shared and shown to the other teams in that league to bring up their level of play. That's been the VCS, and you're right. It again is one of those dark clouds over this situation when you think about not only the immediate time where these players trying to go, but for the near future of the VCS and the type of growth that could be stunted from that region.
They were on the brink of major region status, even in 2019 with some of the Buffalo boys. So I hope that it doesn't set them too far back to miss out on all these big events. We obviously have the regional finals in the LPL starting on Friday, which means we're going to figure out who the last 2 LPL teams going to Worlds. But we also, over the weekend, by the end of the weekend, we've got 4 finals in minor regions to figure out who's going to be filling out the rest of that play-in stage. You've got the LCL Crow Crowd versus UOL, and it's basically the same Unicorns lineup that we're accustomed to seeing. We saw them at Worlds last year, except they have a new AD carry or bot laner by the name of Argonovt, I believe. I'm trying to pronounce this properly, but 4/5 of the Unicorns going to be favorites in that finals, absolutely.
Yeah, and one of the things that you have to be keeping in mind with the Unicorns, sure, you can look at Worlds, but even just MSI, you got to be thinking about the performance that they put up, lack thereof. For a lot of people, they expected the Unicorns would love to provide more firepower, provide more pushback. Want to see that if they're the ones coming through, need to see it right here in the finals.
You've also got the CB Law. You have Rengza eSports and the Red Cannons, both. That's the 4 and 6 seeds. So there were some big upsets in the CB Law. No Flamengo, no Pain Gaming that we'll be seeing at Worlds this year. It's going to be some newer squads. In the TCL, similar. Galatasaray and Nasser Esports. Nasser Esports, I got to highlight because they have Sohwan and Bono, LCK All-Star, MVP level players. It's crazy. Here they are in the finals in Turkey.
Not exactly the names that I was expecting, not only in a finals, but in a situation where they're getting ready to possibly book a ticket to Worlds. But absolutely, as you've mentioned, these finals, getting us locked in, finalizing the teams for Worlds, a good opportunity to get a little bit of a preview at some of the squads that we're going to see for play-ins.
And then finally you got the LJL over in Japan. Obviously, Detonation Focus Me, the team that everybody is familiar with, got the win against Cloud9. Almost got the win against Damwon at MSI. They're playing in the semifinals first because they lost in winner's bracket to Rascal Jester. It's a similar PSG scenario where they have to win in the semifinals to get that rematch in the finals. But the problem is only one team gets through in the LJL. You don't just get to Worlds for being in finals.
I was going to say there's one vital difference between them and what was going on for PSG, and that absolutely is that do or die one spot available. Got faith in Detonation Focus Me, what they've shown us at international events. Hope they get it done. Hope to see them once again at Worlds.
Yeah, it's just a team that you've grown accustomed to seeing, and they've been competitive on that big stage. So it's something you absolutely want to see. But either way, with the LPL Regional, the finals, all these minor region finals, after this weekend, I believe we will have every team qualified for the World Championship, depending on what happens with the VCS. But that means it's the final big weekend before Worlds. But that's it today for League Unlocked. Thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.